On the subject of The Phantom Menace by George Lucas, written and directed by George Lucas, The Phantom Menace. First of all, starting off, The Phantom Menace is an all-time classic, masterpiece in every category, including casting, story, plot, storytelling, special effects, camera work, lighting, audio, not to mention direction and innovations in and pushing the boundaries of even what is possible of the technology to make a movie like this. The Phantom Menace is an all-time masterpiece. Written and directed by George Lucas. Producer Rick McCallum. Yeah, Rick McCallum, 10 out of 10, baby. So that's where I'm starting out here on this one. Absolute all-time classic, Phantom Menace all-time masterpiece. Taking it from the beginning, the opening title crawl, and then laying out the general premise and outline as well as progression of and pacing of this story, this fantastic story, this fantastic galaxy-spanning adventure story, The Phantom Menace. This is episode 1 in the original complete saga, the Star Wars saga, by writer-director George Lucas. Lucasfilm Limited and 20th Century Fox are the studios involved in that particular episode, The Phantom Menace. And then, of course, Disney, worldwide corporation Disney, now owns Star Wars as the copyright, trademark, and all of that business. Google it. Yeah, Google it. But we're looking at the original story, as this story has been delivered to us by the original creator of this saga, this epic tale of Star Wars, and that creator is George Lucas, the master of this universe, the creator of this entire thing, George Lucas. And so we're looking at the original complete saga as delivered to us by George Lucas, including the special editions, the original trilogy, the holiday special, and Clone Wars, the original miniseries. Clone Wars, the original hand-drawn miniseries, or at least it looks hand-drawn. And so we're going to be looking at all of this, including the EU legacy, as well as a lot of the other books and comics, and then, of course, the rest of the TV shows and series, and every part of Star Wars that is now become ubiquitously integral to our society, including modern innovations in cell phone technology, TV, and movie screening devices. Jar Jar Binks is truly the key to all of this. Yeah, not only is Jar Jar the funniest character we've ever had in Star Wars, Jar Jar is totally hilarious, absolutely overwhelmingly hilarious, jarring to the power of 2 and double and beyond. Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar is the key, and George Lucas is the key, as we will see now in this The Phantom Menace. So you know my starting point on this. The Phantom Menace, the prequels, all-time masterpiece. Not only for Star Wars, as in the masterpiece of Star Wars and the Star Wars universe, but just a flat-out masterpiece of film and storytelling. Innovating, inventing, collaborating, pulling together various resources, perspectives, and ways of painting a picture with texture and depth, as well as philosophy and abstract theorization. Not to mention a cast of characters straight out of Looney Tunes. Jar Jar really is the key to getting this whole thing, as he is not only the funniest character we've ever seen in Star Wars, but he really is quite articulate and very much an insightful point of view from the every person, so to speak, the everyman. Yeah, Jar Jar is the every person in the room. He's every person that ever wanted to go on an adventure with the Jedi, but then found out that it's so full of action, adventure, danger, risk, exhilarating, ups and highs and lows, that it's quite scary sometimes. But we learn from Jar Jar the view of the Jedi and of the society, for a personality and a vision that we haven't yet seen in Star Wars. The every person view. So, as we wrap up today's episode, let me remind you that we're talking about and observing, critiquing, if you will, The Phantom Menace by George Lucas. And my position, The Phantom Menace is an all-time masterpiece. And Jake Lloyd deserves an Oscar for Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace. The Prequels is the best Star Wars, friends. And I am your host, Mr. The Prequels. May the Force be with us. We'll see you next time.
Jar Jar is the key man.
There's a lot of politics in The Phantom Menace. Talking senators, the Senate, procedure, whether something is legal or not, according to the Senate. George Lucas has laid out this world, the world of Star Wars, from one end of the galaxy to the other end of the galaxy. And there are outlying systems, and then of course the seat of government, Coruscant, the planet Coruscant, that is one giant city. And we see this web, this fabric of political machinations. Elected representatives, elected rulers, queens, so to speak, the Supreme Chancellor, trade disputes, blockades, the Senate being bogged down in procedure, as we've said, the outline and formation of the body of the Republic, The Phantom Menace, written and directed by George Lucas, a masterful epic, a masterpiece, in fact. From the casting to the script, the story, lights, camera, audio, and so on, and hundreds, if not thousands, of staff, production staff, worldwide, working together to bring us this movie. Groundbreaking special effects that serve, these special effects that serve to bring us the story. And this story is the beginning of the Star Wars saga. Every story has a beginning. And then you have Watto, bringing in one of the characters here that we meet in The Phantom Menace, a businessman, a high roller, if you will. Watto is a parts dealer on Tatooine, in the spaceport where the Jedi and Queen Amidala and her group that is coming from leaving Naboo, as Naboo has been invaded by the droid army of the Trade Federation after the setting up this blockade around Naboo. And this comes from taxation of trade routes. Turmoil has engulfed the galaxy. And while the Senate endlessly debates this turn of events, the Supreme Chancellor has dispatched 2 Jedi Knights to intervene and negotiate a cessation of this invasion, blockade. Of course, it's not an invasion yet. And then the Jedi are finding themselves on Naboo through a series of events. And then, of course, they have, at this point, met Anakin on Tatooine, Anakin Skywalker. And in this pod race, where Qui-Gon, a very risky endeavor, places a bet on the pod race for Anakin to win, betting against Watto for Anakin's freedom. And Watto will then let Anakin go free. And then, of course, we see the Jedi mind trick, Qui-Gon's use of this mind trick. We see Qui-Gon Jinn's style of using the Force, and we understand his methods for using the Force, learning the Force, and practicing as a Jedi. We meet the Padawan learner, at this point, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we see the interaction, the relationship between master and apprentice, master and Padawan learner. And then later we learn that through Darth Sidious, aka the Chancellor, aka Chancellor Palpatine, as he puts it to Anakin in Episode 3. Keeping in mind, we're talking about Episode 1. We're talking about The Phantom Menace. But in Episode 3, if you fast forward a little bit, then the Chancellor tells Anakin that the Jedi and the Sith are similar in almost every way, and including in their way of seeking to obtain greater power, their quest for greater power, according to Chancellor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, in Episode 3. But now in Episode 1, we're just being introduced to this whole world, the politics, this idea that there are planets and systems on the Outer Rim where the Republic has no say. For instance, the Republic's anti-slavery laws do not apply to people living on Tatooine. And this comes as a surprise to Padme Amidala. So we see the differences and the ways of traversing this galaxy and these systems within the galaxy. It's a seat-of-your-pants adventure, a thrill ride. It's the story of three people, mainly Qui-Gon Jinn, the trainer, the master, the teacher, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the learner, the student, the Padawan, the young Padawan learner, and, of course, Anakin Skywalker, the slave. And also, with the midichlorian count, in his bloodstream, in Anakin's bloodstream, we learn the Force is strong with Anakin. And this plays out in further ways, going on into Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and then, of course, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And we follow along these chapters. Chapter 1, we meet Anakin. Chapter 2, we see Anakin as he's becoming a Jedi, and as he is becoming more and more powerful as a Jedi, and dealing with the emotions and the pressures of being an adolescent, growing up through the Jedi system, never actually being allowed to be a child, if you think of it in those terms. Training to be a Jedi from the age of 10 years old, I believe. And then, of course, eventually, Anakin turns completely to the dark side, but we see the beginning of this turn in Episode 2, as especially in this case where, in the instance where Anakin slaughtered all of the Sand people because of his hatred, and as he was mourning because of the loss of his mom and his mom's death. And so he killed everyone, including, as he said, not just the men, but the women and the children. And then he said, I hate them. They're like animals, so I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them. And then, of course, in Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3, we see the little boy, then teenager in his 20s, growing up in his 20s as a Jedi. And then Episode 3, in order to save the ones he loves, that he foresees or perceives will die tragically or too soon, Anakin turns to the dark side and thus becomes Darth Vader. And then, of course, we pick up on that in the original trilogy, Episodes 4, 5, and 6, to the ultimate resolution of the conflict within him, within Anakin, as the son then becomes the means for the father, Anakin, to be redeemed. As we see that in Episode 3, Anakin is the father of two children, Luke and Leia, as these were children named by Padme as she was giving birth to these two children. And you know, of course, Padme is secretly married to Anakin because the code of the Jedi forbids attachment in that sense of being married, especially. And all of this, we see the culture and the training and the expectations and the standard of the Jedi thrust upon Anakin, if you will, from the time he was a child, to lead Anakin actually to the dark side, as the Jedi are blinded by their arrogance, as to not even see within themselves the fault or the flaw that could be turning others to the dark side. So we meet these characters in Episode 1. We see the world. It's political. It's full of tech, high tech, machines designed for war, and political maneuverings and manipulations behind the scenes that is the Phantom Menace. And of course we meet Jar Jar Binks, who's the funniest of all the characters we've ever had in any of these movies, one of the all-time classic film greats. Jar Jar Binks. And Jar Jar is the key, as you will see. But also, if you will be able to get Jar Jar, you will be able to get the Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace is a seat of your pants thriller. Galaxy-spanning adventure. Takes place in space, on a planet that is one entire city covering the entire planet. A planet that is lushly vegetated, covered with green trees and forests, as well as underwater cities and civilizations of beings that live underwater, these Gungans, so on. And then on to Tatooine, the desert planet, where we also encounter Darth Maul. And then, of course, Obi-Wan eventually stops Darth Maul and kills Darth Maul, as we see in this one. Darth Maul will later come back later in some of the other versions of the story. But we know then from the Phantom Menace that as then Darth Maul killed Qui-Gon, who is Obi-Wan's master, trainer, teacher, then Obi-Wan kills Darth Maul. And then there's a celebration in Naboo. They're the capital, the seat of their government. And they proclaim peace between the Gungans and the Naboo. And there we have the Phantom Menace by George Lucas, written and directed by George Lucas, an all-time epic masterpiece. And that's all the time we have for today. May the Force be with us, and we'll see you next time.
Jar Jar is the key man.